Welcome to today's lesson. In this tutorial, we will multiply radical expressions. So we have already added and subtracted our radicals, and we have simplified. Today, we will be multiplying. Let's remind ourselves about the parts of a radical. We have a radical sign. We have the little number tucked up in here called our index, and we have the bigger number underneath the radical sign called our radicand. To multiply radicals, we will first multiply the coefficients. Coefficients are the numbers that are multiplied to the outside of our radical sign. Step 2, we will multiply the radicands, but only if we have the same index. And if we do this, the index does not change. And then finally, step 3, let's simplify if necessary. Let's look at example 1. I know that I am multiplying two radicals together because I see this multiplication dot. Let's first find and multiply the coefficients. The first radical has a coefficient of 1. The second radical has a coefficient of 3. Let's take those two numbers and multiply them together. 1 times 3, of course, is 3. Step 2, let's multiply the radicands. I know I have the same index because they're both 3. So I have a cube root of 6 times a cube root of 4, and I can do that. Cube root of 6 times cube root of 4 will become a cube root of 6 times 4 is 24. Okay. Step 3 says to simplify if necessary. What that means is we need to look at our radical and see if any of our special numbers divide into it. Since we're dealing with a cube root, I need to look at the list of my perfect cubes. And I know that 8 is on that list, and that 8 divides into 24. So I know that I can simplify some more. Let me come over here since I need some more room. I have 3 times the cube root of 24. What I'm going to do is rewrite the 24 into 8 times 3 because the cube root of 8 is one of our special perfect cubes. I like to write the cube root of 8 and the cube root of 3 individually. That helps me. So now let's see. There's been a 3 that's been on the outside. The cube root of 8 is about to turn into a 2, and that's going to join the 3 on the outside. We'll multiply them together, and then the cube root of 3 will stay the cube root of 3 the rest of the way. 3 times 2 becomes 6, and the cube root of 3 stays the cube root of 3. And that's my final answer. Let's review. We first multiplied the coefficients. The numbers on the outside multiplied and stayed on the outside. Then we multiplied the radicands. The numbers on the inside multiplied and stayed on the inside. We then simplified like before. We saw that the cube root of 24 could be rewritten as the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 3. And we did that because the cube root of 8 is a 2. And then these numbers multiplied on the outside and became 6 times the cube root of 3. All right. Let's look at example 2. I'm multiplying because I see this multiplication dot. I found my coefficients, negative 2 and 6, and I'm going to multiply those two numbers. Negative 2 times 6 becomes negative 12. Let's make sure I have the same index. This index is a little 2 because it's a square root, and this index is a little 2 because it's a square root. So a square root times a square root, I can do that. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 becomes the square root of 9. 3 times 3 is 9. So the numbers on the outside multiplied and stayed on the outside. The numbers on the inside multiplied and stayed on the inside. My final step, I need to simplify if I can. Well, the square root of 9 is a perfect square. Square root of 9 is the number 3. So now I've got the negative 12 and the 3, and everything's on the outside. That just makes negative 36. And I'm finished. There's actually no more radicals to do. And our final example, I see that I'm multiplying two radicals. I found my first coefficient 3 and my second coefficient 9, so 3 times 9 is 27. Okay, the numbers on the outside multiply and stay on the outside. But now I have a problem. This first radical has an index of 2 because it's a square root. The second radical has an index of 3 because it's a cube root. I'm not allowed right now to multiply a square root times a cube root, so I cannot let these two numbers multiply together. So I'm just going to write the square root of 7 down in my answer, and the cube root of 4, I'll bring that down into my answer. I cannot combine these two radicals because they don't have the same index. And that's as far as I can go right now. So I'm just going to circle that and be finished. Thanks for watching these 3 examples. We'll practice this in class. I'll see you then. See ya.